If you watch the channel regularly, you'll know I'm not a believer in multicultural ideology. I believe it's incredibly poorly thought out, with no unifying factor to unite people. In fact, all we're really offered is this neoliberal idea of earn as much money as you can, that's all that matters now, and shut up about everything else. And on the flip side, leftist ideology, which is something like, just believe in tolerance, equality and love. In my view, such ideologies fail to grasp the depth of what the human being is, as well as what human civilizations and cultures are. I could somewhat sympathise with the multicultural project if they went for some sort of universalist spiritual message behind it all, but they don't even try that. This is because we're ruled by liberal elites, those with the neoliberal economic perspectives, along with the left-wing cultural ideology. However, I think more and more people are waking up by the day and realising the ideology of the liberal elites isn't going to work. It may work in the trendy offices in London where you get the best of all groups who have pretty much detached from their root identities, basically living a career of earning money and self-centeredness. Yet for the rest of us up and down the country, I think we can see that different factions are forming all over the place, largely adhering to different value systems with a very different reading of what Britain is, what the modern world is, and what reality looks like. And again, if you mention any of this in the mainstream, you'll be told you're evil and stupid and ignorant and full of hate. That's one they tend to like. But to me, it's just a sober observation of what's going on. I don't hate anybody. So while Keir Starmer's Labour Party seemed pretty keen on enforcing their utopian ideological view of the future, I thought it might be interesting to do a counter-experiment, a little thought experiment, if you will, which has a look at what Britain might be like in the next 50 years. Now, starting with an educated guess, where are we right now? Well, clearly we've had decades of far too much immigration. It's got completely out of hand and nobody is integrating anymore, if that was ever the aim anyway. So we're likely to see the British identity, at least to the liberal elite, become increasingly meaningless and nebulous, while groups that have come here increasingly cling to their historic identity. I'd also expect to see a continuation of what we're seeing with the native identity, where they're increasingly demoralised, atomised and materialistic. Given the globalist liberal ideology has such control right now, I'd expect them only to further their aims by telling us we've always been a nation of immigrants, don't you know? It was like that in the past, it's like that now, and it'll be like that in the future. We see the roots of this, of course, every single day in the modern UK. There was a story today that libraries across Wales have been given the task of becoming quote-unquote anti-racist. They aim to eradicate systemic racism by 2030, and as part of that, librarians have got to be trained in critical whiteness studies. Yet anybody who's not completely ideologically possessed can see that this is just the creeping takeover of our cultural institutions that's been going on for years. How dare you think that you own your own countries and have anything to do with them, you evil, white privilege, oppressive scumbags. And this ideology will get increasingly vicious, while anybody who's in the employ of the state or any major corporation will have to be heavily versed in it. Also, we're seeing things such as this. PET has been urged to be removed from the Northeast vernacular at Newcastle University because it's inappropriate in an equality and inclusion toolkit. But I do think elements of this will start to backfire. Yes, lots of people will be brainwashed by it, maybe because they have to for the sake of their jobs, but many people will start to sense that their identity is disappearing. Now, in one sense, I can see this developing into a sort of civilizational rebirth, as many Brits realise we've lost the core of who we are, and it's worth maintaining that. However, when it comes to white working class men, I think they are going to be shafted by the system again. Now, that's not me calling for riots, Starmer Stasi or anything of the sort. It's just clear when you look up and down the country, there are millions of young men who are angry with the system. And that's the fault of the Liberals. They've left them with nothing to lose. They have no political representation. It's increasingly hard to afford a home and provide for a family. The prospects of marriage have gone out the window given the modern values of society and the dating market, and they have to watch as their country has opened its gates to globalist liberalism. They're ruled by people that don't represent them, and they're demonised at every turn and called privileged on top of that. Seems to me that at present the masses are kept quiet with things like football, beer and pornography, but as things continue to worsen and get more stretched, I can see more trouble down the line. To take a step change, another development I think we'll see in the next 50 years is the increasing influence of Islam. Of course, the liberal mainstream seems to think that the growth of Islam can only be a good thing, though I think anybody who's honest about it can see that they do have a very different value system. The birth rates of Muslims are way higher than that of the native population, and on top of that, they're civilizationally strong. They haven't let go of their religious belief nor their systemic values. And of course, as the native population decreases in number and the Muslim population massively increases, we'll see the Muslim vote get more and more prevalence in British society. Of course, we did see that in the last election already with the Muslim vote movement. They were very unhappy about the actions of the British government in its support for Israel and the goings-on in Palestine. This is, of course, the beginning of sectarian politics. It seems to me that you don't have to be Einstein to figure out that this was going to happen. It's pretty obvious. However, I guess I'm just stupid and evil and full of hate and so on, so I can't see the wonderful liberal utopia. Now, I started with Muslims as they do tend to have quite strong opinions, but I do believe all sorts of groups will start to agitate for their own interests. And to be honest, there'll be such a critical mass of them. I think the government, the powers that be at the time, will have to relent and allow different groups to essentially be semi-autonomous within Britain. And you might think, well, will one of these dominant groups just seize power and enforce their own will on the rest of the populace? And I think the answer to that would be no, and I'll explain why. I think basically what will be revealed is the true power structure that we have in modern politics, but is essentially hidden. We're really ruled by a financial elite, and I think that will become more and more clear in the future. In essence, I think the politics on the ground will be divorced from the meta decisions, which will probably be decentralised and taken in places outside of London. Another reason that I believe the political structure will maintain itself is because the London system, the London economy, is largely rooted around financial services, which is very useful to international finance capitalism. Henceforth, I can see a more militarised London where key nodes of infrastructure are protected and the rest of London is a bit of a free-for-all. I think economic inequality will also worsen because of the digital revolution that we're on the cusp of. Of course, lots of automation will come into all sorts of industries, making people pretty much obsolete. But what about traditional Britain? What will happen to that? Well, I believe it will stay, albeit in a minimised form, particularly in the countryside. I think that parts of the countryside will be a remnant of old Britain and people will move out there to feel a sense of home. And although that sounds a bit depressing, I do believe that the communities there will be stronger because we would have finally learned the value of the values our ancestors had and why we need them. The downside is we probably will be looking at the end of the nation state, but what may be born again could be something bigger, something new. We don't quite know if it may well lead us into a better tomorrow, but I do think as ever it's important to be spiritually at peace, philosophically wise, and also have a healthy outlook for yourself psychologically, personally, and physically. That will be a very important thing as we prepare for the chaos coming. As I often say, in deep chaos there's always a chance for rebirth and reawakening to a new tomorrow. I think that's the most healthy way to look to the future. These are some of my thoughts, however. I hope I'm wrong and it's just an easy liberal utopia. That would be nice, but I just don't think it will be. What do you think down below? Do let me know, and do consider subscribing to the channel.